It was one of those blazing July afternoons where the sun hits just right, the kind that makes the pavement shimmer and everyone a little more irritable than usual. After back-to-back shifts handling everything from rowdy teens to lost dogs, I needed a break. So I grabbed my towel, threw on my mirrored aviators, and headed to the one place in the neighborhood that always brought me peace: the pool. But within 5 minutes, my peace evaporated. "You can't be here. This is a private pool, for residents only." I looked up, and there he stood. Tanner, about 13 years old, but already carrying the kind of smugness that takes most people decades to develop. He was rocking designer slides, a gold chain, and an attitude way too big for someone who still needed a ride to school. Behind him was a familiar figure, clipboard in hand, sunglasses too big for her face. Karen. You probably already know the type. Karen, head of the HOA, self-appointed ruler of our cul-de-sac, self-certified protector of neighborhood standards. She once fined an elderly couple for having their Christmas lights up until January 3rd. And now, she was stalking toward me like I was the problem. Tanner didn't hesitate. He pointed at me like I was trespassing in his sandbox. "My mom says this pool is off-limits to non-residents. You need to leave. Right now." Now, here's the fun part. Tanner didn't recognize me. At least, not in my off-duty gear. And Karen? Well, she clearly forgot who I was, or thought maybe she could get away with something. Because, you see, I'm not just a local. I'm not just some guy with pool access. I'm the sheriff of this county. And this pool? It's not just community property. It's on my property. As in, I own it. Signed, sealed, and protected under county records. I could drain the whole thing tomorrow if I wanted to, but I didn't say any of that. Not yet. I looked at Tanner, then at Karen, and instead of explaining, I just smiled. Because this wasn't just another HOA scuffle. This was going to be legendary. Karen had been throwing her weight around this neighborhood for years. The HOA board, the fines, the whispered threats to anyone who didn't conform to her little vision of suburban perfection. People were scared to push back. They didn't want drama. They didn't want retaliation, but I wasn't just another neighbor. And when her bratty, wannabe mini-me son tried to evict me from a pool I literally owned, I realized something. It was time. Time to stop playing nice. Time to stop letting Karen run this place like it was her personal kingdom. And time to show her and her son what happens when you mess with the wrong guy. What followed was a week of escalating drama, HOA meltdowns, and one of the most satisfying reality checks I've ever delivered. People I hadn't heard from in years came out of the woodwork just to watch how it all unfolded. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind. I'll walk you through how we got here. The messy history between me and Karen, how Tanner's ego got supercharged, and what it's like when a power-hungry HOA queen finds herself completely outmatched. And don't worry, there's justice, there's laughter, and there's karma. Lots of karma. So sit tight, because this isn't just a story about a spoiled kid at a pool. It's about how you shut down entitled people and make sure they never pull this stunt again. To really grasp why this pool incident blew up the way it did, you have to understand the full backstory. This wasn't just about a spoiled kid throwing a tantrum. It was years in the making. A slow-burning conflict between me, Karen, and the fantasy world she built for herself. Karen and her family moved into the neighborhood about 7 years ago. At first, they kept to themselves, the kind of neighbors who wave but never stop to talk. No parties, no loud music, no complaints, just a neat little house and a meticulously trimmed lawn. They were forgettable. But that all changed when Karen joined the landscaping subcommittee. Within a month, she turned a volunteer role into a neighborhood surveillance operation. She started measuring the height of people's grass, issuing courtesy notices for things like faded shutters or bird feeders that didn't match the aesthetic. People thought it was just enthusiasm, but I saw it for what it was, her first real taste of control. Then she made her move. She ran for the HOA board and won, mostly because no one else wanted the job. And once she was in, Karen took full command. She rewrote rules, restructured the committee, and began pushing policies that gave her more say over, well, everything. Christmas decorations were limited to 3 weeks. Garden flags were banned outright. Porch lights had to be under a certain wattage. It became ridiculous. And the enforcement? Pure tyranny. Karen fined one family $100 for leaving a scooter on the driveway overnight. Another got dinged for having too many plants on their porch, even though they were hanging from baskets. She even tried to ban barbecue grills from being visible from the street. But what really ticked people off was how selectively she enforced it. If you were one of her favorites, you got a pass. Her inner circle, mostly folks who gossiped with her or showed up at HOA potlucks, could leave their trash bins out for 2 days without consequence. But if you weren't part of her crowd, you were getting a warning notice in your mailbox by sunrise. Now, me? I've never been one to get involved in petty neighborhood politics. I moved here for peace, bought a chunk of land left to me by my uncle, right before I became sheriff, built my house on it. The pool came with the property. It's not just near the HOA, it precedes it. And legally, my land is outside their authority. Always has been, but Karen didn't like that. See, she wanted complete control. And the fact that my property was off limits to her power, it bothered her deeply. I was the one person she couldn't boss around, and that made me her favorite target. She started sending me notices, none of which had legal weight. HOA dues, compliance letters, even threats of escalation. I ignored them all. But when that didn't work, she got bolder. She showed up one morning, clipboard in hand, and told me my backyard furniture was in violation of community uniformity standards. I laughed and told her she was on private land and to kindly take her complaints to someone who cared. That's when she got nasty. A week later, I had a county inspector show up at my door. Some nonsense about a permit discrepancy. I cleared it up within minutes. But it didn't take a genius to figure out who filed the anonymous complaint. This went on for years. Petty tactics, passive-aggressive emails, HOA newsletters with thinly veiled jabs, and all the while, her son Tanner was growing up in this warped little world of hers. Now, let's talk about Tanner. When he was younger, I felt bad for him. Quiet kid, a little awkward. But once Karen and her husband divorced, everything changed. Tanner became her shadow. He mimicked her tone, her posture, even her habits, walking around with a little notepad, pretending to take violations. One day, when he was about 10, I saw him in my driveway, inspecting my truck like he was doing a vehicle report. I came out and asked what he was doing, and he said, with a completely straight face, "Just checking for community compliance." Like mother, like son. It got worse. He left a fake parking citation on a neighbor's windshield because the tires were not straight. He told the Jenkins, "Sitsa frado tortford fadre teens." Kids they couldn't play outside past 7 p.m. He even went through someone's recycling bin to check for contraband. He was being trained to be a little enforcer. And Karen? She encouraged it. Posted pictures of him on the HOA Facebook page with captions like, "Future President of the Board." She gave him that superiority complex and wrapped it in layers of fake responsibility. It was disturbing. Still, I kept my distance. Let them do their thing, as long as they didn't cross my fence line. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before they pushed it too far. Then came the whispers. By year 5, the neighborhood had started to turn on Karen. People were tired of the fines, the lectures, the HOA emergency meetings that no one else was invited to. There were rumors of a recall vote. A few neighbors even called me privately asking if anything could be done. One guy, Mr. Stein, moved out entirely after Karen tried to ban his American flag for being too political. But Karen still strutted around like a queen. She thought she had the whole neighborhood locked down. And Tanner? He had taken up the role of neighborhood watch, which really just meant harassing people from behind bushes with his phone out. So when the day of the pool incident came, and Tanner walked up to me, and told me to leave my own property, I knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't just a bratty kid getting cocky. This was Karen, using her son to test boundaries, to flex, to humiliate. She thought she could finally get under my skin, that I'd get mad, 'cause a scene, maybe even break some HOA rule she could twist against me, but that's where she messed up, because that pool wasn't just a place for me to cool off. It was a symbol of everything Karen couldn't control. And when Tanner opened his mouth and told me to leave, he wasn't just confronting a tired neighbor. He was picking a fight with the sheriff. And no clipboard, no fake violation, no HOA loophole was going to protect them from what came next. The morning started out calm, almost too calm. It was a Saturday in early June, warm, still, and humming with that particular kind of summer laziness that makes you forget the world outside your backyard exists. I'd just wrapped up a tough week. A couple of domestic calls, a runaway situation that ended well but drained us all emotionally, and way too many late-night noise complaints from high schoolers celebrating early graduation. All I wanted was peace. So I grabbed my towel, tossed my phone on silent, and took my book and speaker to the pool behind my house. That pool had been my sanctuary ever since I inherited the land. It's quiet, shaded by old trees, and far enough from the main roads that you can actually hear yourself think. I turned on a bit of jazz, kicked off my flip-flops, and dropped into a lounge chair, eyes closed, breathing deep. 10 minutes in, I hear it. That distinct sound. Tennis shoes on concrete, fast, sharp, and purposeful. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I cracked one eye open, and of course, it was Tanner. 13 years old, maybe 5 feet tall, with more attitude than most full-grown adults I've arrested. He had a baseball cap turned backward, a clipboard in hand, and 2 other boys flanking him like henchmen in a cartoon. "This pool is not for public use," he said, crossing his arms. "You need to leave." I sat up slowly. "Tanner, this is my pool. You're trespassing." He looked like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "No," my mom said, "this belongs to the community. You're not even registered on the HOA list." I blinked. "Registered?" "Yeah, to use the pool. My mom manages it." "You're not on the schedule." He was serious, clipboard in hand like he was dispatching from a control center. I looked over at the gate. Sure enough, a handmade sign taped up in bright neon paper. "Pool access hours, 10 a.m., 6 p.m. HOA members only." Karen's handwriting. No HOA stamp. No official notice. Just another stunt in her growing list of unapproved power plays. "Tanner," I said gently, "this isn't an HOA pool. It's private. I own it. Your mom has no say over it." He shook his head like I was a toddler he needed to correct. "You're wrong. My mom said you've been abusing your privileges. You let people in who weren't approved. So you're banned." There it was. The real reason? Karen had seen one of my friends at the pool last week, a retired detective and longtime buddy who came by for a BBQ. She must have assumed that was her in. That if I had guests, she could call it community use. This wasn't about rules. It was about control. I stood up, calm, steady, not looking to escalate, not yet. "Tanner, I'm going to ask you to leave. This isn't a place for you to play HOA president. You and your friends need to head home." He didn't move. Instead, he pulled out his phone, started recording, and turned the camera on me. This is a private pool under HOA jurisdiction. This man is refusing to leave. He's being aggressive. I'm documenting this for the record. I sighed. He sounded like a bad actor in a courtroom drama, like someone who'd seen one too many. TikToks about Karens getting owned, and decided he wanted to be the star. That's when I knew he'd texted her. Karen. And right on cue, less than 5 minutes later, I heard the heels. Click, 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 marching like a drill sergeant heading to war. The gate flew open. There she was, clipboard, phone, lipstick that looked freshly reapplied in anger. She stormed through the gate like she was executing a search warrant. Tanner said you were refusing to leave. I turned to face her, but didn't give her the satisfaction of standing. I just leaned against the pool railing and said, "You're on my land. This pool is private. I suggest you take a breath and back out the way you came in." "Oh, I don't think so," she snapped. "You've been violating community protocols for months. Unauthorized guests, unreported gatherings, loud music, and now threatening my son. I haven't raised my voice. Haven't made a move. And again, this is private property. The HOA has no legal right here," she scoffed. "I've already spoken with our attorney." "Good. Then your attorney should have told you that your HOA's boundary ends 2 lots east. This pool, this land, this fence, none of it belongs to you." She opened her mouth, but didn't speak. The kids behind her were quiet too now. Even Tanner had dropped his phone. "Karen," I said plainly, "I've let a lot slide. The letters, the fake violations, the anonymous complaints to the county. But you coming onto my land, using your son to harass me, and then acting like you're the law?" I took a step closer. "That ends today," she stiffened. "You're threatening me?" "No," I said. "I'm reminding you. I am the sheriff. I know exactly where your authority stops." Karen was silent for a long moment. The wind picked up a bit, and for a second, I thought she was going to back down. But no. She turned to Tanner, put a hand on his shoulder, and said, "Go home." He hesitated. "Now." Then she looked at me again, her voice lower, cold. "You've made a very big mistake." I tilted my head. "You know what's funny? That's exactly what I was thinking." She stormed off without another word. Tanner trailed behind her, no longer the little enforcer, just a kid, confused and embarrassed. I stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle over everything. Then I picked up my book, sat back down, and dipped my toes into the water. But I wasn't really reading, because in the back of my mind, I knew exactly what was coming. Karen wasn't going to walk away. Not quietly, and I wasn't going to let her. By Monday morning, I knew the storm had officially begun. It started with a letter, hand-delivered, not mailed. A thinly veiled power move. It was sealed in a glossy envelope with Homeowners Association, stamped in gold like it was some federal agency. Inside, a formal notice of violation, accusing me of abusing shared resources, hosting unauthorized gatherings, and, my favorite, intimidating minors. The only thing it didn't accuse me of was kicking puppies. I laughed. Not because it wasn't serious, it was, but because it was so predictable. Karen wasn't just offended. She was on the warpath. This was retaliation, dressed up in bureaucracy, backed by a clipboard and a kid with a camera. I expected the letter. What I didn't expect was how far she'd take it. Tuesday morning, I got a knock on the door. Mrs. Hargrove stood there. My elderly neighbor, and probably the kindest person on the entire block. She looked worried, clutching a Pyrex dish like it was a peace offering. I wanted to warn you," she said. "Karen's going around the neighborhood. She's saying you threatened her son, that you've been letting strangers use the pool, that she's calling an emergency HOA meeting to address, quote, an escalating threat to community safety. I blinked. She's using safety now? Mrs. Hargrove nodded. And she said she's working on a petition to restrict pool use entirely. HOA members only. She has no legal grounds. I know. You know, but not everyone does. That was the part that stung, because now it wasn't just about Karen being Karen. She was mobilizing, whispering in ears, spinning stories, turning good neighbors into suspicious ones. And she was targeting my reputation, not just as a neighbor, but as the sheriff. That same day, I started noticing more people walking by my fence, lingering longer than usual. Some waved awkwardly. Some didn't wave at all. Then came Wednesday. That's when the neighborhood Facebook group exploded. Karen posted a multi-paragraph open letter accusing me of systematic defiance of community standards, verbal aggression, and inappropriate conduct involving minors. She attached screenshots of Tanner's blurry GoPro footage showing me reading by the pool. She even framed it as a moral issue. No one, no matter their job title, should be allowed to act above the rules. Dozens of comments followed. Some agreed. Some defended me. But the damage was done. She'd planted the seed. That night, I caught Tanner, again, lurking behind my fence with the GoPro strapped to his chest like some dollar store detective. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. He just stood there, filming. "Your mom send you again?" No response. "You know, Tanner," I added, "real investigators learn to ask questions, not just hide behind cameras." He smirked. "My mom says everything you do here can be used as evidence. You're under surveillance." I stepped forward, still inside my property line. Calm, collected. "Tanner, I'm giving you a lawful warning. Stop recording my private residence. If you continue, I'll file harassment charges, and I'll make sure it sticks." He backed away slowly. 10 minutes later, I got a call. From my own department. "Sheriff's office," I answered. "Hey, boss," said Deputy Marquez, trying not to laugh. "You're not going to believe this. We just got a 911 call from a local resident claiming there's a man threatening a child outside a pool." I sighed. "Was it Karen or the kid?" "Kid," voice cracked halfway through. "I already flagged it as non-emergency. But you want me to file something? Start a paper trail? If they want to play legal games, we'll play smarter." Because now it wasn't just petty anymore. It was coordinated. She was trying to bait me into reacting, into stepping outside the lines. She wanted me angry, on record, caught slipping, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. Then came Thursday. The clubhouse had never looked more ridiculous. Karen had set it up like a courtroom drama. Chairs in rows, a projector screen, a printed agenda with buzzwords like neighborhood security protocol and officer misconduct. I walked in wearing full uniform. Not because I needed to, but because it sent a message. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't rattled. And I wasn't alone. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Karen was already at the front, flanked by 2 board members and a stack of community statements. She wore a blazer, hair curled, clipboard clutched like a sword. "Oh," she said, too sweetly, "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. Sitting in the front row, she launched into her speech like she was running for Congress. Tanner sat nearby, watching smugly as she rattled off accusation after accusation, referencing vague eyewitnesses, claiming my pool had become a breeding ground for non-resident loiterers, and implying my position as sheriff made it impossible for residents to seek accountability. It was a masterclass in character assassination. When she finally opened the floor, I stood up slowly. No notes, no theatrics, just the truth. "I've lived here longer than most of you," I began. "I've served this county with integrity for over 2 decades, and I've watched this HOA shift from a tool of community support into a playground for unchecked Control. I explained clearly that my property was legally separate from the HOA, that the pool was part of the original land deed, that I had never charged for its use, never opened it to the public, and had every right to use it, alone or with guests. And more importantly, I said, turning toward Karen, I've endured years of harassment, letters, and false claims, and now your son, a child, is being weaponized in your obsession with control. That ends now. Karen stood, ready to interrupt, but I raised a hand. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to warn. If this harassment continues, if I catch your son filming me, if I receive one more fake violation notice, if one more neighbor is manipulated into fearing me, I will file formal charges, not as your neighbor, as the sheriff. The room was dead quiet, and then applause, soft at first. Then louder, one by one, neighbors stood. Some of them I hadn't spoken to in years. Mrs. Hargrove even wiped a tear from her eye. Karen? She didn't say a word, just stood frozen, watching her entire campaign unravel. That night, I went home with a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. But I wasn't naive. Karen wouldn't stop. Not completely. People like her rarely do. But she'd been exposed. The narrative had shifted. The spotlight was now on her. And that made all the difference. Because she had tried to play judge, jury, and executioner. And now the real court was in session. After the HOA meeting, you could feel the shift in the air. Karen had lost control of the room, and worse, she knew it. But people like her don't go quietly. They regroup, they scheme, and when their pride is wounded, they get desperate. The very next morning, I got a letter, certified this time. Another violation notice. This one accused me of disruptive conduct, creating a hostile environment, and, no joke, abuse of professional authority. It was laughable, and it was also exactly what I needed. Because what Karen didn't know was that I had already been preparing my counterattack. For weeks, I had been documenting everything, every letter, every emergency HOA email, every time Tanner wandered onto my land with his little camera rig, even the bogus 911 call, all on file, all time-stamped, all neatly organized in a folder labeled HOA Harassment Evidence. And now, I had one more thing, a public meeting where I calmly and clearly stated I would pursue legal action if the behavior continued. And then they continued it anyway. So I made my move. I contacted my attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who'd dealt with HOA abuse cases before. I gave her the folder, the letters, even screenshots from the Facebook group. Her eyes lit up. "You've got them," she said. Karen's operating far outside her legal bounds. By the end of the day, we'd sent a cease and desist to both Karen and the HOA board, formally notifying them that their behavior constituted harassment, that they were attempting to assert authority outside their jurisdiction, and that any further incidents would trigger a civil lawsuit. We also included a formal HOA audit request, which, under the subdivision's charter, any resident can file if supported by 5 homeowners. I had 10, and the names on that list? People Karen never imagined would turn on her. The fallout was immediate. By Monday, Karen was panicking. She called an emergency board session, private, behind closed doors. But this neighborhood, secrets don't last long. Word leaked within hours. The audit request hit the community group chat like a bomb. Neighbors began asking questions. Real ones. Why were our dues raised last year without a vote? Where's the financial report from last quarter? How much money has been spent on legal threats? Things snowballed quickly. Karen's power wasn't just shaken, it was unraveling. 2 board members resigned. One messaged me anonymously and said, "This isn't what I signed up for. She's using the board to fight personal battles. I want nothing to do with it." And then, the silence. Karen, once a constant presence in every thread, stopped posting. Tanner? Disappeared. No more filming, no more fake citations, no more sneering across the lawn. Rumor was Karen kept him home from school for his own safety. But even the kids weren't buying that. What people did buy? That Karen had finally overplayed her hand. On Thursday, I got a call from the county property office. An anonymous complaint claimed I had illegally built a structure, referring to my pool house. It was old, well before Karen's time, but I knew exactly who made the complaint, so I invited the officer over. When he arrived, I handed him the stamped and signed documentation. He glanced through it, chuckled, and said, "This happens more often than you'd think. Someone with too much time and too little power." I raised an eyebrow. "You have no idea." He filed the report, complaint invalid, and added a note, potential misuse of county reporting systems. Strike 3, and just when I thought it couldn't get more surreal, it did. On Friday afternoon, an official community-wide email went out. Pursuant to Article 7, Section B, the Board hereby announces a vote for the removal and replacement of the acting HOA president. The meeting will be held next Thursday, and all homeowners are encouraged to attend. That was it. The smoking gun. The consequence she never saw coming. The weekend that followed was quiet. Almost unsettlingly so, neighbors began knocking on my door again, not with complaints, but with gratitude. Kind words. Thank you notes. One guy even brought over a six-pack and said, "We should have backed you up sooner." But what stuck with me most was Mrs. Hargrove. She came by again, lemonade this time, and sat on the porch with me like old friends. "I knew Karen was overbearing," she said, "but I didn't realize how scared we'd all become to speak up. It was like we were living under a tiny dictatorship." "Bullies thrive on silence," I replied. "All I did was break it," she smiled. "Well, you did it loud enough for the whole county to hear." Still, there was one final piece left. Saturday morning. Knock on the door. It wasn't the mailman. It was Karen. She stood on my porch like nothing had happened. But her eyes gave her away. No clipboard, no sunglasses, no superiority complex. "I want to talk," she said. I didn't answer immediately. I just stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "I'm not here to argue," she added. "I just think we should clear the air." I stared at her. "You sure? Because last I checked, you were still filing complaints." "That wasn't me," she lied. I tilted my head. "You expect me to believe someone else is fighting your battles now?" She said nothing, so I continued. "You spent weeks trying to ruin me. You dragged my name through the dirt. You used your son as a pawn. You've lied, manipulated, and harassed. And now that it's backfired, you want to chat?" She shifted on her feet, uncomfortable. Then, finally, she spoke. "You embarrassed me. That's what it was all about. Not safety, not community, pride. Not once did she say, 'Sorry.' Not once did she acknowledge her part in any of it." I took a breath. "Karen, I'm not your enemy. I never was. But if you ever step onto my property again without permission, if your kid tries to intimidate me, or if I get one more complaint traced back to you, I will press charges." Her face went pale. "I'm not bluffing," I added. "Ask around." And with that, I turned, opened the door, and walked inside. Did she stay for a second, waiting for more? Maybe, but I didn't look back, because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to. The vote wasn't close. Out of 74 eligible homeowners, 61 showed up. 55 voted yes to remove Karen as HOA president. 5 abstained. Only one voted to keep her in power. That person? Karen herself. The meeting wasn't dramatic. There were no shouting matches, no theatrics. Just quiet determination and tired neighbors finally taking back what they should have never lost: their voice. When the results were announced, Karen didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She simply stood up, nodded once, and walked out of the clubhouse. That was the last time I saw her at any official HOA event. And just like that, the reign was over. But if you think that's where the story ends, think again. Because after the queen is dethroned, the real cleanup begins. The following weeks felt lighter. People walked their dogs a little slower, smiled a little more. The constant sense of surveillance disappeared. Lawn chairs reappeared. Porch swings got reinstalled. It was as if the neighborhood had collectively exhaled after years of holding its breath. A new interim HOA board was formed. Volunteers, not tyrants. Real people. People with day jobs and actual empathy. Their first act? Canceling half a dozen ridiculous Karen-era rules, including the ban on garden flags and the 17-point holiday decor policy. I didn't attend the meetings after that. I didn't need to. My job was done. Karen kept to herself. For weeks, the curtains never opened. Her car never left the driveway. Some people speculated she was planning her next move. Maybe a legal challenge. Maybe another power grab. But none of that came. Instead, she just disappeared. Not physically, not yet, but socially. She stopped attending gatherings. She stopped replying in the Facebook group. Even Tanner stayed inside. It was strange how quickly a presence like hers could vanish. And it made me realize something. Power is an illusion. It only exists if people believe in it. And no one believed anymore. Then one morning, I was loading groceries into my truck when I saw Tanner at the edge of my driveway. No camera. No clipboard. Just a quiet, awkward kid standing in yesterday's hoodie. "Hey," he said. I nodded. "Hey," he looked down. Kicked at the gravel. "My mom says we might move." I didn't respond. "She says it's because of the neighborhood. But I think it's because of you." That caught my attention. I raised an eyebrow. "Because of me?" He shrugged. "She says you ruined everything. But I don't know." I watched the videos again, the ones I took. I leaned against the truck bed. "And you weren't mean. You didn't yell. You just didn't do what she said." I nodded. "That's pretty much it." He was quiet for a second. Then, "I don't want to be like her." I gave him a long look. "You don't have to be." He looked up at me. Not defiant, not bitter. Just a little lost. "You know," I said, "your mom's not the villain of your story. She's just someone who got lost in hers. You get to write your own." He nodded again, then walked away. No dramatics. No big redemption arc. Just a quiet moment with a kid who might, just might, turn out okay. Later that week, I got a letter. Not a violation. Not a complaint, a thank you, no signature, just neat handwriting and a simple message. "Thank you for standing up when the rest of us were too scared. You reminded us we're not powerless." A neighbor? I kept it, not because I needed the praise, but because it reminded me that one voice can start something. That doing the right thing, even when it's uncomfortable, can wake people up. A few days later, I passed by Karen's house and saw a moving truck. No sign. No listing in the community bulletin, just a quiet exit. A neighbor said she was relocating closer to her sister in another state. Others thought she'd left because the shame was too much. I didn't ask. I didn't care. I just nodded at the movers as they packed up years of boxes and bad memories. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It was just the end of her chapter. Fall crept in slowly. Trees turned. Nights cooled. The pool stayed open a few weeks longer than usual, and not once did anyone question who belonged there. One evening, I decided to host something simple. A low-key BBQ, no RSVP, no big invitation. Just a stop by if you're around kind of thing. And they did. Over 40 neighbors showed up. Some I hadn't seen since the vote. Some I didn't know had lived here for years. The food was simple: burgers, hot dogs, lemonade. The conversation, even better. No HOA talk, no drama, just laughter, stories, and shared relief. I watched as kids splashed in the pool, the same pool that once symbolized a war. Now just a place for joy again. And as the sun dipped low, someone asked me, "So, think we'll ever have another Karen?" I sipped my soda and smiled. Maybe. But at least now, we know what to do when we see one. And that's how the story ends. Not with a bang. Not with vengeance, but with community. With a neighborhood that learned how to stand up. With a sheriff who just wanted to read by his pool and ended up reminding people how to fight back. Karen tried to rule through fear. I responded with facts. She used her son as a weapon. I used patience. She tried to isolate me. I built connections. She made it about power. I made it about principle. And if you're wondering what happened to the pool, it's still there, still private, still mine, but now it's open. Not legally. I'm still not handing over the deed. But spiritually, it belongs to the people who respect it. It's where kids come after school to cool off. Where neighbors sit on the edge, with their feet in the water and talk about nothing at all. Where no one worries about rules taped to gates or violations on their doors. It's not a battleground anymore. It's a symbol that you don't have to be loud to be heard. That calm can be stronger than chaos. That sometimes the best way to fight back is to stand still and let the truth do the work. It's funny how something as simple as a pool became the center of a war. But that's the thing about control. It always starts with something small. A rule here, a complaint there, a suggestion that slowly turns into a demand. Most people don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. That's why this story matters, not because of a Karen, not because of a spoiled kid with a GoPro, but because of what happens when people forget their own power. See, fear doesn't need fists to win. All it needs is silence. And for a while, Karen had that silence. She had people second-guessing themselves, neighbors walking on eggshells, residents convincing themselves it wasn't worth the trouble. And that's how control spreads, until someone says, "Enough." In my case, that someone just happened to be the sheriff. But it doesn't take a badge. It takes boundaries. It takes standing up. Not with anger, but with truth. Not with threats, but with clarity. And it takes consistency. Because bullies don't back down the first time, or the second. Sometimes not even the 10th, but eventually they fall. And when they do, what's left behind is something worth protecting. A neighborhood where people wave, again, where kids play without being filmed, where the pool is just a pool, not a battlefield. If you're watching this because you've got a Karen in your life, maybe not on an HOA board, maybe at work, in your family, wherever, this story's for you, because you're not crazy. You're not imagining the manipulation, the mind games, the shifting goalposts, and you're not alone. The hardest part is always the same. That first moment you push back. The moment you decide, "I'm not going to shrink to make you comfortable anymore." That's the turning point. And no, it's not always smooth. You might lose a few people along the way. You might get called the problem. You might even doubt yourself. But stay steady, because the people who try to control others are loudest when they feel their grip slipping. And when they fall, it won't be because you shouted louder. It'll be because you stood still while they stumbled over their own games. I didn't set out to be a hero. I just wanted to swim in peace. But peace, it turns out, sometimes takes a fight. Not with fists, with backbone, with receipts, with calm, unshakable truth. And when the dust settles, you'll be glad you stayed grounded. because you'll walk away with something bigger than a win. You'll walk away knowing you stood up for what was right. And that, sometimes, is all it takes to change everything. So here's my message. Stand your ground, even when your voice shakes. Document everything. Don't respond to chaos with chaos. Respond with calm. And never forget, bullies count on your silence more than your weakness. Break the silence, and you break their control. And if you ever find yourself facing a Karen at your own pool, just remember, it's not about the pool. It's about your peace. And that is worth defending always.